In today's episode of HR Visionaries, we speak to Jeff Pohl from Warden AI. Jeff helps companies in the HR. In today's episode of HR Visionaries, we talk to Jeff Pohl from Warden AI. Jeff helps people to implement AI solutions in the HR departments. Stay tuned. Welcome to HR Visionaries, the show where we discover the truth behind contemporary HR. I'm your host, Benjamin. Join me as I unfold today's talent ecosystem with HR innovators from around the globe. Welcome to the latest episode of HR Visionaries. I'm very much looking forward to my guest today. Jeff, it's great to have you.
Hi, Ben. Great to be here.
Jeff, can you tell us a bit about yourself? Who are you?
Sure. So I am currently the co-founder and CEO of a tech startup called Warden AI. But before that, my background is in AI for the full part of my career. Originally studied it at Oxford as a part of an engineering science course. Was a software engineer in an AI company for a while. Moved to product management, and then piece by piece made my own journey into finding a business. Which is what's led me to find Warden. And we work in the AI trust and compliance space, which I'm sure we'll get into. Won't rattle off my spiel immediately, but that's what I do now.
Indeed. I think the issue of trusting an AI is such an incredibly interesting topic. So first of all, how do you keep track on what's going on?
There's certainly a lot going on. It's hard to keep track. We are quite embedded in networks. We've got good advisors, lots of contacts in the tech space that I've built up over the last decade and more. And we also follow a lot of, because we're in the compliance space, we follow a lot of the discussion online about regulations that are coming and how they may be. So number of different channels. Almost full-time job keeping track of the rapid change in AI and AI trust at the moment.
Now that so many things happen at the same time. So one opens Twitter and there's a new major update from one of the leading AI companies. It's a very unstable and volatile world, isn't it?
Certainly is, yeah. And I think it possibly feels even more than it actually is true. Many of these things that happen are, particularly with social media, and the way that companies also market, to shout louder than they actually can perform. It's very easy for that to feel very overwhelming with the amount of announcements and commentary about the impact of AI, for example, on the world, besides all the other political things happening in the world as well.
Indeed. What do you think will be the impact of AI for the next 10 years?
It's a big time frame to think about with AI. Yeah, huge. There's such an interesting one with any technology, but particularly AI. I think it's pretty kind of clear, it's a no-brainer that at some point AI will replicate or replace, in some cases, a lot of what humans do. With hopefully meaning that then we can do a lot of other things instead. And the question is always about timing, right? Like people have, for decades now, have over predicted when this sort of change would happen. I think over 10 years we will see quite a big change. I'm personally a bit more on the timeline wise, a bit more on a pessimistic angle than a lot of the commentators that you hear out there forecasting the absolute world-changing impact of AI over the next couple of years. I think it will be something that frees up a lot of our time and menial tasks and admin and that kind of thing in our jobs and in our lives, giving us more time to focus on other things, more strategic things, more creative things, a bit like the calculator replacing the need to do arithmetic as well and as much as an analogy. I think possibly the edge of that time frame, maybe a bit later, we'll see even more disruption. But I think in that sort of time frame, it's more about 20-30% of what we do can be done by an AI and freeing us up to do a bit more. That's my 2 cents.
You said something super interesting. So in the last, let's say 20 to 30 years, we kind of overestimated how much can be done by technology. And did you think now we tend to underestimate how big the change is that comes with AI?
Good question. I suppose it depends on who we're thinking, who we have in mind. I think like to my point just now, I think many people who are optimistic and talking about AI, and I personally think overestimate the timeline, as in the things going to happen faster. The big changes going to happen faster than I personally think they will. Time will tell, of course. Who's right on that? And then on the other side, it's very easy to hear these grand claims. I've heard them many times before, even going back to 70s, 80s, not even just the last 20 years. People had pretty bold predictions on what AI could do, and got the timing way wrong. It's very easy to think, oh, actually, this is just a lot of hype and it's not really going to do anything. I think that will catch many of those people by surprise. And often, the way with any technological shift is the key moment happens, whether it's the smartphone coming out, whether it's internet coming out, and there's a lot of hype and there's some change and some adoption early on, but really it's a much longer after that key moment. It just gradually builds up into a wider ecosystem, into permeating society in a way that the real changes happen. Like arguably now we're even just last few years seeing the real impact of cloud computing, which is an invention really of 15 years ago. So I think this big change with AI getting so powerful with large language models a couple of years ago, some impact now, and then really 5, 10, 15 is when we'll look back and think, wow, like things are quite different now because of that change.
You mentioned you guys focus on trust and compliance when it comes to AI. How does it work? How do you create trust in AI?
Yeah, right. Huge topic, obviously, and it's a category. It's a super interesting one. I think for me, it's fascinating because it combines kind of both the optimism and the concern and and some extent the skepticism of AI into one problem, right? Like this has great potential, and let's look at that positively. But there's also significant risk, whether that's with of course compliance with regulations and not being compliant is a risk, whether it's about bias and discrimination of an AI tool, just accuracy and and not doing the thing that it should do as you expect. Data privacy, there's quite a long list of risks that can come with it. So I find that very interesting, kind of conflicting waters, and we're seeing that in our market and our customer base at the moment, where on the one hand there's a great drive to try and get these benefits, the kind of productivity benefits, but kind of opposing force of concern about it. Super interesting space. How we approach building trust is first of all, we specialize in this niche of HR technology. We work where we see the highest risk systems. So a common example that we work on to make this more concrete is in recruitment space, where AI is being used in many cases to ultimately judge someone's potential for a role, whether that's a new role or internal role. Looking at CVs and resumes, having interviews with people, all this sort of stuff is starting to happen. And where there's obviously a big risk that the AI doesn't do that in a way that is fair or indeed meritocratic and accurate. And we approach that by helping to try and bridge the trust gap between the company that's developing that software, that AI, and the company that's procuring it and buying it. That's our current focus, right? There's lots of different people that might have distrust in this process, but right now that's kind of where we are focusing on them. And then we have a platform, and I'll give over the details here, but that comes in as a third party and evaluates an AI in a platform for some of these risks, with a particular focus on AI bias, to help identify, mitigate, and ultimately communicate trust as to why assuming things are okay, why this technology is okay to be trusted, and try and bridge that trust gap where it's justified.
When you think about the HR space, why did you pick HR in the first place when you thought about, okay, where should I operate as a company?
It's a great question. So yeah, my background is not in HR, so I'm new to the industry since starting the business a couple of years ago. My background's in AI, in technology, and particularly in regulation technology. So hence the looking at the space of trust in AI is kind of next, what we see as one of the next major problems of the world. And did the usual kind of business development, speaking to people, trying to find where people had problems, where we could find opportunities, in the good old classic kind of market research way. And we just found that HR technology had so many interesting use cases of AI that truly interesting, truly transformative as well. Think of AI kind of, to an extent, kind of copying what people do and doing it more faster, more better. People, HR is all about people, so there's a lot of opportunity there. But of course, huge risks as well, right? And that's where we found this kind of trust issue with potential gain, but also fear and concern. On the other hand, most acute from anywhere else we were looking, and so we found that, and have since got into it and built a customer base and a brand and really focused on this niche. And we're not planning to move outside it anytime soon. We might bigger picture expand into other industries and be really big business, but we think there's so much to be done with AI and with AI trust inside HR. That we are dedicated only to this industry. We're the only provider that looks at this space and only specializes in this one industry. So that's a story.
Well, it's actually interesting. You mentioned, okay, you're not from the HR space. However, you found the HR space very, very interesting and a place where risks indeed very much matter because people are involved, and therefore an AI must not have any kind of bias or must not make the wrong decision because it's people being involved.
Absolutely, yeah. That's a great summary of why it's such an important issue in this space and how we landed on this one.
Well, when you considered moving into the HR space back then, what were the first steps you took? So how did you, when you talk to people, what kind of risks they saw in AI?
Yeah, so it happened quite organically. One of our first ideas was a bit more focused on simply on the large language model kind of chatbots that were just 6 years ago were suddenly being put in everywhere because language models became powerful and well known, and we were specifically looking at risks of chat-based systems, and then spoke to some friends or contacts that we had in the space, and just got the most interest from them, and in the end found actually not so much the chatbot piece, but just AI being used to, even old-fashioned AI, not like the new large language models, being used to do things like rank or score, resume or people applications. I was already there, never mind with language models coming in and changing things. And had a couple of people before we even were ready to commercialize or really had a product offering to buy it from us. So we had that great kind of exciting validation as an early business where you haven't really got anything yet. You're speaking to people to do research and they're saying, we need this so much, we'll pay you like right now, basically, even though you barely have anything yet. So it's pretty strong validation that we had that demand, and we expanded that, spoke to more people, and found that this wasn't just one or two people. This was like a repeat major issue, and so we just kind of grew it from there.
When you started, what did you find were some concerns that were kind of overblown and some concerns that people tend to underestimate?
Do you mean concerns that like people who maybe going to adopt an AI have about AI
Exactly.
itself generally.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think in many cases, at least enterprises buying an AI tool, by a vendor, they care a lot about data protection, and data privacy and data security. And that's, early conversation. And still in many cases today, that's the thing that gets the most discussion and airtime and questions and RFPs and so on. When in procurement, I would say, or at least one of the most risk that people are concerned about. And that's of course because over the last 20 years or so, with software becoming so prevalent in our lives, regulation and just awareness of the risks around data protection have become so embedded, and people become so aware of them for many good reasons that's really become a fabric of like how we interact with different buy software. And that's of course just going straight over into this new world of AI. Let's ask these similar sort of questions with a slightly different flavor of what's the AI doing with this data rather than just software. But I do think that's a bit overblown. I think we've already seen some change of stance there. We had, when the large language models like ChatGPT got really big, a lot of enterprises were like just saying absolutely no to this. There's no way we'll do this, or we won't use ChatGPT at all. We'll have to do we'll have to host ourselves. And what we're seeing now, 2 years on, is that there's less reticence in that regard. Nothing that's gone away, but people are starting to be like, oh, maybe it's okay actually. So I think people have perhaps overblown that risk because it was such a big risk with software and one of the ones that got most attention. And I think however, they're underlooking, or overseeing the overlooking. That's the word. They're overlooking the kind of slightly more novel risks that are actually really just for AI, not for software, right? Because I do see AI as fundamentally different from software. It's not actually software; it's a different kind of category of technology, and those risks are more related to decision making. So if AI is making a decision, how can you trust that decision? Does it kind of be explained in a way that is not only understandable but actually true to how it actually made the decision? Is it biased or fair or unfair? Is it making accurate decisions that you as an organization or a person would agree with? These types of things, I think, are much bigger risks and get some attention, of course, but quite frankly, not nearly as much as they should or probably will.
Well, the kind of mistakes AI makes, I find that in many ways quite interesting that we judge AI actually pretty harshly, while when you think about it, AI takes over roles from people, and also people make mistakes, right? And nobody can ever guarantee that he or she would always be completely perfect and flawless in an execution of a task. Why do you think is the standard towards AI so much higher?
It's such a fascinating one, isn't it? It comes up so much, and I think I kind of see it getting almost philosophical about it as like a bit like what people say they do compared to what they actually do. Do you know what I mean? If you have some sort of ethics question or ask someone what's the moral thing to do in the scenario or how to behave, people often give quite ideological, answers that they might, the rational part of their brain believes, but when it comes to an action that would demonstrate that, they often don't live up to that, right? I'm definitely in that category. People are kind of like that. To me, it seems similar where we can put this kind of rational part of the brain and be like, oh, does this system we're actually creating do this thing? How should that be? Well, of course it should be, all these things. Forgetting that which is good as well, right? So that's great. Like we should have quite high standards for this sort of technology, but maybe lose sight of the fact that there's a status quo, there's a current system, which is maybe themselves or people powered things, that maybe leave a lot to be desired in terms of their effectiveness. And I think that it's mostly a good thing to help hold AI to higher standards, but in the interim of getting to that stage, there could be a slight shortfall of people missing out on opportunities to use technology, even if it's not perfect, but is better than the status quo of the people powered process. So that's something that, I think holds some people back, but I think that's part of the journey we're on as a society.
Indeed, and well, the there are some jurisdictions that actually have very strict laws or stricter laws than others. Do you think those could be like a competitive advantage? So, for example, for a European company to already be compliant with many rules and perhaps laws that will be introduced in the United States only in a few years' time?
Great question. I'm quite topical in this space at the moment about the pros and cons of the EU AI Act, for example, which is the kind of most wide sweeping AI regulation that's been signed and coming into play. Very hard to know. I can see both arguments. Certainly that maybe, yeah, by governing, by defining what's okay and what's not, basically, by regulating it well, that can give people trust to use. They know there's a regulator, they know it's regulated. I think that makes a lot of sense, and hopefully is the way that it will play out in Europe or anywhere that does put in that kind of regulation. I think on the flip side, though, if you look at the US, and actually quite interestingly, a huge number of our customers are US based, despite the fact that it tends to be less ahead of regulation. It's not necessarily to equate regulation to risk. And also there's different types of regulation. So one way to think about the US market is that that kind of self-regulates more than Europe in the form of litigation, i.e. law. So, might be people have different opinions on this, whether it's a good or bad thing. But in many ways, you can have fewer regulations. For example, there's loads of, just human-based regulations like civil rights laws about, what you can, anti-discrimination. And yes, you could say we need new regulations to explicitly say AI can't do this, but you actually don't need to do that because AI should also follow the regulations that exist and apply to humans. It's not a separate thing. And so a market like the US, which has lots of litigation, kind of self-regulates through litigation in many ways, which doesn't happen as much as Europe. But then, in Europe, we tend to bring more regulation in. So I'm maybe not answer your question in a useful way, but there's different approaches, and I think both are going to be quite effective, actually. I don't know if it's going to be like an either or situation, but yeah, time will tell.
Indeed. Well, when it comes to HR departments applying AI-based solutions, how do you start advising your clients? So what are the first steps and the most important steps, perhaps?
Do you mean this is about like an HR department who's thinking about adopting AI? What are the first steps for them to
exactly
to go through that whole exercise of like what shall I do and how do I get it? Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah. So I think the more important things are not even necessarily related to what we do, but about making sure there is a real opportunity for AI to actually help with something. I would definitely, even though I'm an optimist and a big believer that AI is helping or will help, and the opportunity, there still is definitely far too much kind of marketing hype out there, and lots of vendors, making claims and building AI-driven products that probably don't need to be AI-driven or hard AI-driven. Really, it's just like putting, dressing it up. So I would encourage the team to start with, what their actual goals are and needs and all these kind of classic things, and see where AI can fit in. My personal view as well is that AI will have the most impact when it is, I don't want to use the word replace because that's scary, but like when it applies to a people-powered process. So which is a bit different than other technology, right? Where like, I don't know, the internet comes along and instead of writing letters, we write emails, and that kind of changes things in a number of ways, right? But like with AI, it's really the benefit comes in where you say, okay, I used to do this thing, or someone used to do this thing, and now AI does a lot of that for me instead. Rather than think, oh, AI could do this other thing, but if it's not a task or a project or something that a person does today, then but an AI could do it, but no one actually does it today. To me, that's probably not a good use case. Could be wrong, but so yeah, I feel like you want to look at where people are doing things, and there's an opportunity for that to be done in combination, but with the AI, where maybe the more menial part or repetitive part is done by the AI, and then the person can then actually do more of the kind of strategic work in their job instead. So yeah, definitely encourage to be very clear on what those things are and what the opportunities are, and then look out to vendors. I'm not sure many people are doing this or not. I probably wouldn't recommend, unless you're a huge enterprise, but trying to build anything in-house, even though it seems tempting with the likes of ChatGPT and LLMs, it can be quite easy. I think it's deceptively difficult, even with an in-house team, development team, to get these things right. And there's no shortage of third-party vendors out there who are doing these things. So I would also recommend looking out to the market and seeing what's there, and then doing appropriate due diligence on the different vendors, looking through the marketing, looking beyond the kind of marketing flash, trying the product, and then ultimately, this is where it gets tricky. But the only real way to evaluate an AI tool is to use data. Other than just trial and error yourself, you can test it out. But if you can put together some sort of data set of, here's what we think good and bad looks like, and then run the same data against a few different providers and see how well they perform, you can have quite a mathematical way of evaluating a vendor. So for example, to make a simple one being a resume CV based scoring system, for example, quite common, you can go and get a bunch of of candidates, put your own your own scoring on them, and take that around and systematically evaluate the different vendors and see which one performs the best and make that one of your criteria, rather than just sort of trialing it out. Because unlike software where you can click things and see things and see how see the value as you do that, these are kind of database products. You can't really see that in an easy way. It really comes down to how accurate and how well it performs the task. And to do that, you really need data. But of course, that can be hard to do, and that's something that we help with sometimes too.
Well, you mentioned companies building stuff in-house. I understand it's sometimes tempting since it feels so available. However, at the same time, it requires like lots of management attention to build something, and therefore, the third-party providers, and let's speak, of course, with a bit of like my view as a founder as well. It does make some sense not to look at in-house solution. I think for most parts.
Yeah, obviously there's no one rule, right? There could be a good reason for it. So yeah, we don't make it a blanket rule, but there's certainly no shortage of support that can be brought in from people who are doing this across an industry with lots of expertise. And even if it seems straightforward with building any kind of tech product, it's the devil's in the detail, right? You might be able to get a prototype going quite easily and it's kind of working, but getting it really reliable, dealing with risks, these data risk, bias risk, whatever, that sort of thing is, adds up deceptively how much effort it is to do properly. And that's where, a specialist provider can be a good option.
When you work with your clients, how long do the projects normally last?
So a bit of clarity on what we do. So we offer what we call third-party AI assurance, which basically means that we as a third party evaluate an AI system for trust issues, like ones that we've discussed already. But we do that through a product platform, and we do it in a continuous way. So we're not like a consulting company that's coming in and looking at process or anything like that. We actually integrate into the system and are running at a regular frequency, and reviewing, basically monitoring how the AI behaves. For example, around bias is one of the most common products that we get bought and used for, and then we report on the level of bias or lack thereof. We benchmark it, and then report that out to any stakeholder. So that includes the developers themselves, but also includes external stakeholders like customers and end users. So that's so it's ongoing in that sense. That it's recurring, a bit like a SaaS product that you're kind of continuously on, rather than being a kind of fixed project.
What do you think will be the next big thing after AI?
After AI, it's hard to think. It's hard to say when you're deep in the middle of that world. It's hard to think of anything else. And there's so much And AI is such a big. It'd be a bit, to me, it's a bit like saying in the 60s or 70s, what's the big thing after software? It's like, well, we've got 50 years or more of left of this. And so that's my first answer. Like more, the next thing after AI is more AI. But besides that, I don't know, to be honest. Maybe I'm a bit narrow in my perspective. Maybe blockchain will start to be useful. I don't know.
Well, I find it so incredibly interesting because it feels like so a vast majority of problems that humanity faces can be solved with AI. So therefore, it kind of feels like, hey, AI is like the thingy that or the kind of technology that will be so magnificent going forward, as you said. So as in the 60s, okay, what is beyond software? Well, it will be around. It will change many things quite rapidly.
Exactly, and there's so much to do, and to be again more pragmatic and not just optimistic. It's going to take a long time, right? For all that we've had improvements and it's useful now, it's still in its infancy, really, and so far away from being at human level intelligence in a material way, at least in my opinion. So yeah, there's decades and decades of probably relatively gradual and then occasional spikes of more and more intelligent things that I can do. Maybe we're taking away some of the things that we do today, but instead freeing us up to do other things. And that's going to be a long, multi-decade journey, if not even longer than that.
Do you think there's a reason why companies should not apply AI solutions?
I mean, yeah, I think so. I think when there's not a clear need or use case, I think, or there's not yet AI that can kind of do that. So obviously, when we talk in these high level ways, it's easy to say, of course, AI can do anything in theory, and one day that's probably true, but right now it's still still not that capable. So I think one should be pragmatic about what it can and can't do, and then but so long as there's clear value, as long as this is a thing that you've got maybe quite a number of people doing, spend a lot of time on, and it's not, and AI could do it similarly well, then I don't see, as long as the risks are appropriately managed, which is a big topic, and should be overlooked, but as long as they're appropriately managed and it's appropriately used, then I don't see a good reason not to go ahead. And kind of touching on what you've said before, there's also opportunity for it to do things better than people do. And it's like a bit like the calculator example, right? It's like you can do the arithmetic better with the calculator. Doesn't mean the invention of calculators took away maths from from people doing math.
Not at all.
It just meant they could do maybe focus on other types, more more kind of higher level stuff. And that's, I think, the analogy that I would stick with here too.
When you picture an HR department in 5 years, how would this HR department look like?
Interesting. I think there'll be certain areas that there'll be, and there'll be like a collection of different, almost like AI agents, helping with like the more menial tasks in many different aspects of HR, right? Whether that's answering basic, questions that employees have about payroll, whatever, that's not too advanced. Whether that's pre-screening candidates, for example, I think kind of pick a department or aspect of a role like that, and I think the more systematic, perhaps high volume, repetitive elements will be able to have an AI doing quite a lot of it. Again, leaving the final decision, the strategy, planning to people. I don't think we'll be having AI doing that yet anytime soon.
Jeff, thank you so much for your time. It was really cool, super interesting what you guys do, and I hope we stay in touch indeed.
Thanks very much for having me. Really enjoyed the chat.
And thanks to you all for listening in, and see you next time.